Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer from a new-to-me brewer. This one I did get from Tavour, and the beer is from a brewery called Little Beasts Brewing Company. They are based in Portland, Oregon. This beer today is called Volkvangr, which is Norse. We'll get into the naming convention here. This is a dark ale clocking in at 6.7% ABV. So first thing first, before we get into the interesting name of this beer, label art. It's kind of befitting once I tell you about the name and its significance, unless you're into Norse mythology, but it's kind of covered in a bunch of, looks like feathers, a la from arrows and claymores, long swords, things of that nature. Pretty cool design, and it's got their kind of lion mouth kind of open, their symbol for the brewery. Very, very cool. So, Volkvangr, that is the second half in Norse mythology of where people go when they die in battle. Most people know Valhalla. Odin rules over Valhalla, and then Freya rules over Volkvangr. So half go to Freya, half go to Odin, and that is from Norse mythology for those who die in battle. That's the significance of the name. Now, why they named this beer Volkvangr, I couldn't begin to tell you, but pretty cool name. Nonetheless, looks great. I love a good dark ale. 6.7, that's a really nice sweet spot. A little higher than your average, just kind of run-of-the-mill dark ale, but always exciting to jump into a new beer from a new brewer. And a dark ale is a pretty good place to start. So we're going to use our nice, it's got a little bit, see, I wasn't sure exactly what the root kind of underpinning of this was, but I've got this nice, this is a separate stout glass, kind of a pub-style stout glass, with that little bubble in the side. Normally would be great for catching head, but this holds a really nice volume of beer. And indeed, if I had a glass like this under a nitro-tapped beer, if I had a nitro-tap set up in my house, I would be really, really happy with this glass, even more so than I already am. But I'm gonna get this poured right in. Okay, yeah, it's looking nice. It's pouring about the color of a nice classic brown ale, maybe a tick darker, but indeed it is a dark ale. I'm going to slow this down. This one's not really having a problem forming a head here, so we'll let that settle out a little bit. Yeah, visually, it's a dark brown. It's a dark ale exactly as advertised. It looks really, really nice. There's a lot of kind of red and orange hues popping out of this one that I can see in here. Obviously, it did pour a very beautiful, thick, creamy, foamy head here on top. So let's get right up over this for a sniff. Wow, yeah. That smells really nice. You can pick up a lot of caramel, a lot of underpinning roast. It does actually, a lot of the aromas I'm getting off of this put me in mind of a brown ale. Though they call this a dark ale. And yeah, I think that's fitting because there's a lot that reminds me of a brown ale, but there's a lot in this that on the nose is really smelling a lot like a Schwarzbier. So I'm guessing that they used a fair bit of different kind of combinations to bring this into fruition. And indeed, I didn't look at the specifics, and I still haven't got new glasses yet, so I will do my best to read you what they say about this beer, what they did with it on the side of the can. I do know that's there, so we're just going to let that continue to settle for a minute. And it says here that they brewed this with Norwegian, of course, named after Norse mythology, that tracks Norwegian Kveikist. Okay, great. Chocolate wheat, kilned coffee malts. I can't quite read that. I can see Hallertau hops, Hallertau Blanc, and Kalista. Maybe it's tough to say. I'm so sorry. It's a little hard to read with that bright light in the back of my eyes. And of course, I do still need new glasses. I know it's horrible. I will address that eventually. But nonetheless, we do know Kveikist. That's going to make an interesting kind of throw on this beer. And if they're throwing around this kind of Norse underpinning, a really cool addition. So now I'm starting to get where they're going with this name. But very neat. Let's finish topping this off. I think I can get the rest in here. Yeah, no problem. And yeah, it did form a nice head. It's still holding pretty well. Obviously, the big foamy bulk of it did settle, but we still got a nice little pad floating on top. It smells great. It looks great. Let's jump right in, see what this brewer is about. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's really nice. So, as advertised, it's a dark ale, and you can taste a lot of what they said on the side of the label, even if I hadn't read that my brain immediately would have gone to, and it smelled like this on the nose. So definitely you get in the flavor profile what the nose alludes to. And it does remind me a lot of traits of both a well-done brown ale and a Schwarzbier. So there's a lot of roasty underpinnings, and it's the kind of deeper kind, the very deeper depth of roast without that insane intensity. And that's where I'm getting kind of these Schwarzbier vibes. So it's very clearly deeply roasted malts, but it doesn't have the intensity and in your face of like an Imperial Stout or something like that. It's a lot lighter. It's a lot easier drinking. And indeed, even though this is a dark ale, I would say that it does favor a lot more kind of a lager, a Schwarzbier. It's got that easy drinking quality to it. It's light. The other thing I could tell you is extremely silky on the mouthfeel. The resistance feels right for 6.7. It's got a nice medium bit of resistance to it. It really matches the expectation of the ABV, but it's very silky smooth, very creamy. Very nice mouthfeel. In terms of the other half of the equation, kind of the brown ale influence that I'm getting, there are these slight kind of nutty overtones that are coming out of it. And I do get those quite often in many brown ales. Not all. It's almost requisite in a nut brown ale, but even a standard non-termed nut brown ale, you'll often get these underpinnings of nutty quality to it. That's really quite clear coming through in this beer. Now, they said that they use Kveik yeast in this. I've had a few beers with Kveik yeast. This one, I think it's really driving a lot more malt-centric. So yeah, you can get a little bit of the underpinnings. Kveik yeast can sometimes give a little bit of a souring. And this one, I'm not getting a lot of that. I'm really getting a lot of drive and dominance out of the malt bill on this one. So in that respect, it's a lot more akin to a just classic dark ale. It's a style that is very much malt-centric, and the malts that they chose in this one are very nice indeed. So there's a lot to process here. It's very clean, very easy drinking, got a very nice mouthfeel. I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to let everything re-intensify, pick apart. I wasn't really paying that much attention to the body, but I will make a point of that on second sip. Make sure I didn't miss anything, and we'll talk about this finish. But a very nice beer. Take two. Yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice. So the body on this very much matches the mouthfeel. It's very much kind of a medium, which sits in line with the ABV range. It's exactly what you would expect. It's very nice. It feels very good. Not super weighty, but it matches. Everything matches on this beer. On second sip, re-intensification. The malt bill really comes through. It kind of re-intensified that, but it let me taste that upfront bite of the Kveik yeast again. It's got a slight kind of earthy sourness to it, slight. But this, again, is very much driven by the malt. So you get that a little bit up front. I don't want to say it's got a sharpness because I don't think it's particularly sharp. But if you're paying attention, you can pick it out. Oh, yeah, that's definitely a different yeast that's in there. It almost reminds me of like a naturally fermented with some wild yeast in there. And yeah, it absolutely works into play in this beer. But then you're immediately taken into this darker, roastier territory, this darker corner, and it's just filled with this nice underpinning of nuttiness. There's a little chocolatey, there's a little bit of this kind of toast, and a lot of it almost reminds me of like when you leave a slice of bread in the toaster for too long and you get that slight char, that slightly burnt edge on the crust. I'm getting some of that, and in a beer like this, it works extremely well. Not a lot of big, pungent, bold bitters, I would say. Perception to me, IBUs, we're talking maybe 15-ish range, so not over the top, but a very nice beer. In terms of the length of the finish and how it plays out texturally, it's very wet, very full and round to the end. It's not a supremely long finish in terms of the overall length, but it is definitely above average, especially considering that there is a relative noticeable lack of intensity of bitters, but it does have a very dominant roasty malt bill impetus pushing it out, and it is indeed longer than average. It's not over the top. We're not talking IPA territory here with lingering bitters that really coat the palate, but it is longer than you would expect. Overall, I think it's a very well done dark ale. Absolutely tasty. a wonderful first beer to try from a new to me brewer. I really like this one. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Little Beast Brewing Company's Volkvangr, a dark ale clocking in at 6.7% ABV. Little Beast is based in Portland, Oregon. So this was a really, really nice first beer to try from a brewer from whom I've never had anything from prior. Really, really nice beer. Slight little deviations on the norm, especially with the addition of that Kveik yeast, but a very, very well done and very tasty beer indeed. So let's jump right into the scores. Starting with the aroma. This is a dark ale. You know, you kind of never know what you're going to get, but this one did have a quite pronounced aroma for the style. You know, it's one that, especially with a head that started by pouring at least an inch thick of foam, I didn't expect to really get as much detail as I did, but it was very, very nice. There were a lot of elements that reminded me, it was kind of two styles in one, at least aromatically, and really it was kind of a classic German Schwarzbier mixed with like brown ale. Very, very nice and very clear, in-your-face aromas. Really well above average. The aroma on this one gets an 8 out of 10. For the taste, this one I thought was absolute perfection for the style. And really that Kveik yeast did play a very interesting part. You kind of had to be paying attention, but you could get a little bit of that underlying slightly sour, slightly funky side that you often get with Kveik yeast. But it was an interesting pairing, and I really think it worked well in this beer. The taste gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the body, for the ABV range for the style, it was textbook. Body gets a 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel, this was extremely silky. Had the right amount of resistance, and it really paired well with the weight of the body, but very, very silky indeed. The mouthfeel also gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish, this was above average. Especially kind of surprising on this one that it wasn't led by an abundance of intense kind of hop-related bitters. Really what pushed the length on this one was the underlying roasty character that came out of the malt bill, which was absolutely delicious, but it was above average in the length on this, which I didn't anticipate. The finish does get a 7 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did form a very nice head. It was quite thick, quite creamy. It stuck around most of the time. It did eventually settle out, and for a couple of minutes had a really nice pad before it really kind of got down to nothing, but did a great job. Above average. Head and retention gets a 7 out of 10. For the appearance, this was textbook for a dark ale. Kind of a little bit darker than a brown ale, kind of somewhere in the middle. Very much in the spectrum, exactly as advertised. Appearance gets a 10 out of 10. For the balance on this I really, really appreciated. Especially, and I've come back to this in a few mentions, the Kveik yeast. That's a very non-traditional yeast to be using in the style of a dark ale, but I think it worked exceptionally well in this, and of course tied into the Norse beer name here. But really, really nice twist, really nice addition. Made the beer very distinct, very clearly its own thing. I loved it. I wouldn't have changed a thing about the balance. 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, subjectively, I really, really enjoyed this one. I give it a 10 out of 10. Finally is an example of the style. So overall, this beer did extremely well. Just a few categories it didn't get perfect scores, but in the grand scheme, I did think this was an excellent, excellent dark ale. Had a lot going for it. It kind of went in a few little deviations, different directions than the norm, but it very much made its own unique beer. So overall, I thought that for a classic dark ale with a twist, it was very much near the top of the heap. I give it a 9 out of 10, which does bring the total score on Little Beast Brewing Company's Volkvangr to a 91 out of 100. So well above average. If you're a fan of dark beers, be they lagers, be they ales, this is absolutely one that I would recommend checking out. Especially if you're going to sit somewhere, pour it into an appropriate glass, let it get up to an appropriate temperature, don't drink it too cold. 55 degrees, I target all of my beers, British cellar temperature. There's a reason for that. Consistency, but also beer opens up as it gets warmer, for better or for worse. Some styles typically drunk colder than that, but I keep it consistent on my channel. For this beer, I would recommend 55. Just do yourself the favor, pull out a thermometer, let it get there so that it really, really opens up. so you can get the subtleties of the Kveik yeast, if for no other reason, and then see how it interplays with the different malt characters in the hop bill. Absolutely worth your time. A very, very good beer. A very good first beer from a new-to-me brewer. I will absolutely be keeping my eyes out for more beers from Little Beast. This one I highly recommend. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.